So it's another very wet day in the middle of June. We're getting very heavy showers coming across, but the sun is out in between them, which is nice. And should we go for a second trip up to the bog, see what's going on up there now. So it's a bit of a contrast since I was last up here. The place is absolutely soaking now. So that's the end of the roads of turf down there. My zoom is up to 52 times magnification, so it'll give you an idea how long these rows of turf actually are. And it was cut a couple of weeks ago. It's still very wet because of all the rain we're after been having. The bog itself is very wet. You can see a lot of the places where pools of water have been forming. So I suppose all the water is good for all the plants and animals that live up here, but not for the turf anyway. You can see we have pools of water lying in exactly where the turf is actually spread. So that's not good. So like I said in the last video, naturally you're going to have pools of water everywhere in the bog, both on the cutaway bog down here and the high bog up there. And I don't mind that. I suppose it helps all the natural plants and animals grow, helps the frogs to spawn, gives them somewhere to live. And I don't really like draining it off to a certain extent, unless it's actually going to interfere with the turf that I've spread, which it would have had over here. So this would be a very low-lying area of our spreading ground, so I just dug a small little trench there just with a spade, just to drain off the water. And there was actually some pipes in here from years gone by. This is always a place where water seems to gather. Now believe it or not, I think in the mid 80s it was actually possible to get a grant to develop your bogland. That's when a lot of the drainage work was done on the bogs around here. All the turf banks as such were divided up and there was proper drainage put into them so you could actually use them. Now obviously they're still very wet, they're still boglands, but it just gave a provision for water runoff from the surface of the bog and that, just to enable us to actually use our resource. It didn't really change the bog in any way though. The bog is always going to be wet. And the sun has come out, lovely. So this is probably the highest part of our spreading ground. It's just a little hill up here. You can see how long these rows are. So this is highest part of it's obviously going to be the driest part of the turf, and you can see there's a kind of a crust forming on this here. Now a little bit of rain actually helps a crust form on the turf, but too much rain early on, just after the turf has been cut, so when it's still very water laden, the raindrops actually put little holes into it and can completely ruin it. This bit here is not too bad, but bits down there which were wetter suffered with the rain a lot. So you can see all the marks in the turf there. They're the sod marks that the machine made. It doesn't actually cut right down through them, it just puts a mark at the top, just to create a kind of weak point in the big long continuous sod. And of course as the turf dries it shrinks and gets smaller, so it'll crack away at each sod mark. So all the turf there has to be put into little stacks like these, which are called footings. Maybe there's different terms for them in different places around the country. But you have to wait until the turf is significantly dry to do this, because the weight of the turf on the top of the stack will actually crush the sods on the bottom of it if the turf is too wet. So you do have to get it reasonably dry before you can stack it up like that. That gets the turf off the ground. You can see there's gaps in between there for the air to blow through it. That really helps dry it out. But it can take a couple of months from the time the turf is cut until the time it's dry enough to bring home. And I see not too wet for Bordemona. Don't know exactly what they're doing. Maybe they're just doing maintenance work. It's hard to see them doing any milling or anything. See, they always carry fire extinguishers on the front of their tractors as well. Working out there is a particular fire hazard. So I've worked out I have 538 yards just by walking along it. Let me see, 538 yards, there's about 24 sods in a yard, so that's about 13,000 sods, which will all have to be handled individually by hand to put into those little stacks like I showed you there, called footings. If the weather gets really bad, you might have to put them into a clamp or something like that just to finish it off if it can't be, if there's no way we can get it dry enough to bring it home. And also then we have to load it by hand into trailers to bring it home and then offload it by hand into the shed as well. So everything has to be done by hand when you're doing it on domestic scale. There are machines available to do most of the work. If for, say, people who cut turf to sell it and things like that, they have machines to turn it instead of footing it, and then a machine to load it. But for the domestic turf cutter like me, all of this here behind me, all 13,000 sods, has to be footed by hand, possibly put into clamps by hand, and has to be put into a trailer then to draw it home, and offloaded by hand. So it's a lot of hard work goes into this, really. So an awful lot of work has to actually go into getting your turf, so for your home heating for the year. It is a bit of a risk. The weather can turn crap and it can just, you won't be able to get your turf dry enough. And an awful lot of work goes into it, and it's all physical work, it's all very difficult, and a lot of time has to be devoted to it as well. So it only suits a certain type of person, but there's lots of people in Ireland who depend on turf for their home heating fuel. It means you're completely independent, you don't have to use imported coal or imported oil or stuff like that. How can that not be a good thing?